What if your quiet coastal home was invaded overnight by bulldozers, floodlights, and a commuter rail project you never approved? That happened to me. But instead of backing down, I turned their mistake into a freight empire and made the HOA president the face of her own downfall. Let's begin story. Point 1. The Midnight Invasion. The night it happened, the wind off the Atlantic was sharp, rattling the glass panes of Noah Raines' weather-beaten home perched above Breakwater Cove. He had fallen asleep at his drafting table again, compass still in hand, designs of a tidal energy converter spread beneath his cheek. It was nearly 2:00 a.m. when he was jolted awake not by thunder, but by something far more unnatural. It sounded like a cargo ship was scraping its hull across the cliffs behind his property. Noah staggered up, disoriented and blinking. The old lighthouse foghorn wailed once, then silence fell. He heard it again, steel grinding, engines revving, and something massive shifting through the dunes behind his house. With his heart pounding, he threw on his boots, grabbed a flashlight, and stumbled into the cold night air. The beam of his light caught something impossible. High-powered LED construction lights, 10 or more, flooded the dune ridge that separated his property from the township below. Bulldozers, excavators, survey crews in hard hats. Massive machinery was thundering across what had always been his land he had inherited from his grandfather, a World War II tugboat captain who'd fought to keep this stretch of coast unspoiled. In the chaos of glare and diesel smoke, one machine stood out, a track-laying vehicle. Noah froze. Actual rail tracks were being laid into the ground, stretching over the dunes and toward the back of his property, cutting through the tall seagrass like a knife. "What the hell?" he whispered, then screamed, "Hey!" No one answered. The roar of machinery drowned him out. With adrenaline overriding caution, he ran into the lights, waving his arms, demanding answers. A man in a vest labeled site supervisor finally acknowledged him with a short, disinterested glance. "Sir, this area is under authorized development. Please step behind the barrier." "Authorized by who?" Noah snapped. "Greenstone Dunes HOA. It's pre-approved common utility space. We're following the blueprints." Noah blinked in disbelief. "This is my land. I live right there." He pointed back toward his clapboard house silhouetted against the cliff. The man didn't flinch. "That's between you and the HOA. We're on a schedule." "Schedule? For what? A railway? And this quiet coastal haven?" Then he saw it, a large sign erected in front of a dune ridge like a monument of betrayal. It read, "Future site of the Breakwater Coastal Express Terminal. Brought to you by the Greenstone Dunes Homeowners Association. Community first, always." Noah felt the bottom fall out of his world. He didn't remember much after that, just yelling, trying to shove through workers, demanding to speak with someone in charge. His questions were met with shrugs or blank stares. Someone mentioned the HOA president. "Karen handles that," they said. Karen. Noah had heard her name whispered around town. Karen of the HOA, the suburban storm cloaked in pastel sweaters and iron policy. She had a reputation for charm that smothered opposition like smoke. But even she couldn't have authorized a rail terminal through private and touchable land. Back inside, Noah paced like a caged wolf, cold sweat clinging to his neck. He made call after call to the town council, the county assessor's office, the sheriff. No one picked up. His last resort was Logan, his old Navy buddy, who answered half asleep and laughing until Noah swore on their oath that this was real. Logan went quiet. Then he said two words that clung to Noah like steel cables, "Get vengeance." Noah stared out the window as the machines carved up the dunes under sterile white light. The land was crying out, and no one heard it. But he did. And he was going to make damn sure someone paid. Point 2. The Queen of Greenstone. By dawn, the heavy machines had vanished, leaving behind a grotesque scar carved into the land. A crooked line of unfinished rail cut across the dune ridge like a stitched wound. Noah barely slept. He spent the early morning digging through his fireproof lockbox, blowing dust off deed records, aerial photos, and boundary surveys. Everything confirmed what he already knew in his bones. This land wasn't part of the Greenstone Dunes HOA. It never had been. He'd bought the property specifically to avoid them. But they had come anyway, like termites with blueprints. By 8:00 a.m., he was in his truck, barreling down the coastal highway toward the quaint little clapboard town hall, still wearing the hoodie and jeans from last night. His eyes were bloodshot, jaw clenched like a vice. Inside the Greenstone Dunes HOA Officia boutique-style building that looked more like a bakery than a legal authority, a receptionist with bubblegum pink hair and earbuds lazily blinked at him. "I need to speak to the HOA president now," Noah said. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, chewing her gum like it owed her money. He leaned in, voice low and cold. "No, but I have a property deed that says she's building on land she doesn't own. That's all the appointment I need." Whether it was the tone or the word deed, the receptionist finally tapped a button on the intercom. A door opened, and in she walked. Karen Dunlap. Blonde bob haircut, white blazer, heels that didn't belong on cobblestone, clipboard like a blade. She had the air of a woman used to walking into rooms already won. She smiled as if she were greeting a guest at a charity auction. "Noah Rains, right? I've heard of you. Very off the grid, as they say." He cut straight to it. "Did you offer as a construction crew to lay rail across my property last night?" She laughed, not nervously, not guiltily, just amused, like a child who'd found an adult playing dress-up. "That project, yes, very exciting. We're revitalizing local transit access. The plans were fast-tracked under community infrastructure." "You mean trespassing?" Noah said, his voice ice. Karen raised an eyebrow. "The survey shows that portion of your land as shared use buffer zone, porous boundaries. It happens sometimes when properties aren't properly maintained. Honestly, the grass was so overgrown, we weren't even sure where your fence line ended." Noah took a step forward, heart pounding. "You think a bit of overgrown grass gives you the right to pour concrete through 7 acres of coastal preservation?" Karen smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Noah, the community comes first. You may feel wrong now, but once the station is built, your property value will skyrocket." He stared at her for a long second. "You're not just wrong, Karen. You're criminally wrong." She dismissed him with a wave. "If you have a concern, file it with the planning board. Meanwhile, I'd suggest letting this go. The shuttles are on a tight schedule." Noah didn't respond. He didn't scream. He didn't punch the wall like he wanted to. He just turned and walked out. Because now he knew the truth. Karen wasn't just clueless. She was arrogant. She didn't make a mistake. She made a decision, a bad one, and she assumed no one would stand in her way. Back home, Noah flipped through the records again. Every line confirmed it. His land was not and had never been within Greenstone Dunes jurisdiction. It was legally distinct and registered under his name. He even found an old letter from a previous HOA attempt to annex the area rejected outright. They had no paperwork, no permit, no rights. But they had poured concrete anyway. He picked up his phone and called Logan. "I need that favor," Noah said. Logan's voice came back instantly. "What do you need?" "A freight line that needs a home." Point 3. The Freight Gambit. The air in Noah's office smelled like salt and vengeance. His grandfather's old nautical maps lined the walls, and beside them, now tacked with purpose, were newly printed parcel maps, county zoning records, and a full-scale blueprint for a freight logistics platform. The night after confronting Karen, Noah hadn't slept. He had been too busy drafting revenge. Not the petty kind, not the kind that fizzles out in angry Facebook posts or passive-aggressive legal filings. No, this was calculated, professional, the kind of revenge that came with shipping manifests and diesel fumes. By sunrise, Noah had already sent out 3 mails and 1 fateful text to Colin Mackey, his former colleague from a maritime freight outfit they both worked at during their time in the Gulf. The message was short and surgical. "Still looking for an East Coast coastal logistics point? I've got 7 acres, pre-paved by idiots." Colin called within 4 minutes. "You're kidding." "I wish I were," Noah replied, "but the foundation's already half done. Rail tracks, utility hookups. All I need is your operations team to finish the job." On the other end of the line, Colin let out a slow, disbelieving whistle. "Jesus, Noah, you're sitting on a golden dock. That location's perfect. And if the groundwork's in hell, you just saved us 6 months of red tape." "Exactly," Noah said. "I'll lease you the land. 10-year deal, triple market rate." Colin didn't even hesitate. "Done. I'll have legal drafted by Friday. Just keep it quiet until we're signed." That night, while the HOA's contractors continued work under the illusion they were building a quaint commuter stop for latte-sipping tourists, Noah was in his study sipping scotch and typing fire. He pulled old structural schematics from his archives, designs for industrial-grade loading ramps, flood-resistant storage bays, livestock-compatible platforms, and diesel engine permits. He adjusted the HOA's existing blueprints, repurposing them with surgical precision into something much larger, much louder, and far more permanent. The mock-up he created was titled Breakwater Intermodal Freight Terminal, operational 24/7, zoned for heavy industrial, authorized. When he mailed the draft lease to Colin's legal team, their response came back before midnight. Looks perfect. Just send us the deed confirmation. The following morning, Noah returned to the county clerk's office. He met a sharp, efficient records manager named Della. When he explained the situation, she didn't blink. "Oh, I've heard about Karen," she said, typing rapidly. "She's pulled this kind of stunt before, but never like this." Within 10 minutes, she mailed Noah certified GIS maps, title records, and a legal verification document stating clearly that the land in question was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Noah printed them on heavy stock and added them to the folder now titled Operation Return Fire. Normal people, he thought, would take this documentation straight to the sheriff or the local paper. They'd shut down construction and maybe get a court injunction. But Noah didn't want to shut it down. He wanted to use it. Every inch of rail they laid, every nail they drove, every dollar of HOA money they burned, it would all feed his freight empire. By Wednesday, he had quietly contracted a local construction crew operating under a shell company name to start modifying the community station into a proper industrial-grade terminal. These weren't clueless suburban workers. These were union guys with port experience, hired discreetly and paid well. They replaced the flower bed foundation with steel mounting brackets. The ticket booth was gutted and wired into a communications control hub. Lighting was upgraded to warehouse intensity. A small livestock ramp was framed out beside what Karen thought was going to be a bike-sharing kiosk. Karen didn't notice. Why would she? She was busy planning her grand opening. Noah saw the flyers pinned to the cork board at the town coffee shop. Coming soon, Breakwater Coastal Express. Ribbon cutting and smoothie bar sponsored by Greenstone Dunes HOA. He nearly laughed out loud. She had no idea. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Point 4, the ribbon and the wrecking ball. The morning fog rolled in thick over Breakwater Cove as the town buzzed with anticipation. Karen Dunlap's pet project, so-called Breakwater Coastal Express, was about to have its official grand opening. Balloons were being tied to railings, folding chairs arranged in rows, and a red ribbon stretched dramatically across the freshly poured platform. To everyone else, this was a charming new amenity. To Karen, it was her coronation. To Noah, it was checkmate. He watched the preparations from his window, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand, and the Titan Freight logo stitched neatly onto his jacket. The lease had been signed. The permits had been filed. The terminal was now a legally binding logistics hub, with full 24/7 operational clearance. And best of all, Karen had no idea she had just spent HOA funds building it for him. By 10 o'clock a.m., the guests arrived. Some were town officials, others were curious residents. A few local reporters showed up to cover the community revitalization project, cameras already rolling. Karen stood at the platform in a pastel blazer and white slacks, flanked by clipboard-carrying board members who looked more like backup dancers than actual authorities. She held a pair of comically oversized golden scissors and practiced her speech with the grace of a woman convinced the world owed her applause. Noah made his way down the path from his home, cutting across the edge of the dunes. He didn't rush. This moment had taken precision, silence, and weeks of patience. He wanted to savor it. Just as Karen lifted the microphone, the ground began to rumble. At first, the crowd thought it was distant thunder or passing traffic, but then came the horn, a deafening, teeth-rattling blast that shook the bones of the platform and silenced every voice at once. Heads turned, phones came out, the cameras swiveled. And then, like the opening scene of a disaster movie, the freight train arrived. 3 220-ton locomotives emerged from the mist, pulling nearly 24 cargo cars, gravel, timber, livestock containers braying with goats and pigs, steel piping. The train hissed, clanked, and roared as it pulled directly into the station. The platform shook. Decorations blew away. One of the balloons popped like a gunshot. Karen froze mid-scissor lift. her smile faltering as the sheer scale of the logistical monster unfolded before her. Forklifts disembarked. Noah's workers filed off the train in coordinated movements, unloading cargo and shouting into radios. The illusion shattered in seconds. A pig trotted past the refreshment table. Someone screamed. Karen finally found her voice, shrieking, "What is this? This isn't supposed to be here." Noah stepped onto the platform, calm and steady, wearing his Titan freight jacket like a flag. "Perfect timing," he said loudly. "We were worried we wouldn't have a ribbon for the first shipment." Karen turned to him, eyes wide with horror. "Noah, this is supposed to be a commuter rail station." Noah handed her a document. She scanned it, her face drained of color. "It's not," he said. "It's private property, leased to Titan Freight under a commercial logistics license. You're standing on a 24-hour freight terminal, legally approved, city certified, and fully operational." One reporter gasped audibly. A local kid shouted, "Yo, the pigs are loose." Karen looked up, glassy-eyed. Her hands trembled as she clutched the scissors like a totem. Noah turned to the cameras. "Big thanks to the Greenstone Dunes HOA for providing the foundation. Really saved us on overhead." The crowd erupted. Some laughed, others booed. Phones filmed everything. A woman near the front whispered, "This is going straight to Reddit." Another muttered, "Karen just built a freight station for pigs." The freight team carried on. Industrial lights flickered on. Cranes began shifting cargo. The mayor's assistant walked off in stunned silence. Karen tried to regain control. She grabbed a megaphone and screamed, "This isn't sanctioned. We've been sabotaged." But no one was buying it, especially not the dozen goats currently bleeding in front of her podium. Noah didn't linger. He walked past her, down the platform, past stunned residents and flashing cameras, back toward the dunes. Behind him, the sound of industry rose steel against steel, cargo hitting pavement, forklifts humming like thunder. And in that chaos, one truth rang louder than all. She built it, and the freight came. Point 5. Karen's collapse. By Monday morning, the video had already gone viral. Karen's expression frozen in disbelief, gold scissors midair, goats bleeding in the background was immortalized in thousands of retweets and YouTube uploads. Someone added dramatic music and slow-motion effects. Another dubbed her speech over the horn of the freight train. The top meme, a still of Karen next to a pig with the caption, "Build a dream, delivered pork." But what entertained the internet crippled the HOA. At their emergency meeting that night held in the clubhouse of a luxury condo community known as the Decks, dozens of Greenstone Dunes residents crowded in, demanding answers. Karen stood at the head of the table, trying to maintain composure, but her foundation was cracking. "I was misled," she insisted. "This was a coordinated sabotage, a hostile takeover of our vision." A man in the back yelled, "You paved someone else's land without permission." Another woman added, "You used our dues to build a cargo dock. My toddler won't sleep with the train horns." Karen's usual tactics, harm, condescension, deflection, weren't working. She had spent years crafting an image of calm control, but now, with every horn blast echoing through the hills and every meme spreading her humiliation wider, the mask had shattered. The whole board looked like cornered prey. Roger, the longtime treasurer, stood up and cleared his throat. "I'd like to formally request an internal investigation into the permitting process," he said, avoiding Karen's glare. "And I'd also like to recommend we're consider Karen's leadership." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Karen slammed her gavel so hard it split in two. "You're all turning against me because of a video," she shouted. "No," someone muttered, "because of a freight train." Across town, Noah was already 3 steps ahead. After the chaos of the grand opening, he wasted no time. He filed a civil suit against the HOA and Karen personally for trespassing, unlawful construction, and property damage. The documentation was airtight. He included drone footage, county records, HOA mails including one where Karen explicitly authorized construction with or without compliance, and photos of the terminal's earliest foundation stage stamped with timestamps and GPS data. The courthouse clerk nearly whistled when she saw the file. "They're gonna regret every inch of that rail." Karen tried to strike first. She filed a complaint with the city inspector, citing unauthorized industrial use, noise violations, and even weaponized livestock. The inspector visited the site, took one look at Noah's permits, and left without saying a word. Next, she called the media, trying to spin the incident as an attack on community values. But every reporter who showed up only wanted to ask about the pigs and the memes. She stopped answering her phone after one particularly brutal local editorial titled, "From Hull Queen to Cargo Clown, Karen's Fast Track to Infamy." By Thursday, the whole board members began showing up at Noah's house one by one. Some arrived with apologies, hats literally in hand, others offered deals. Roger even brought a bottle of expensive whiskey. "We didn't know it was your land," he said, nervously sipping from his flask. "Karen told us it was utility zone buffer space. She said you signed off." "Did you see a signature?" Noah asked coldly. Roger hesitated. "No, but she said." "She lied." Roger slumped into the porch chair and stared at the freight terminal, now bustling with forklifts and workers under industrial floodlights. "She's finished," he said quietly. Noah didn't respond. He didn't need to. They all knew it. Karen had tried to turn Noah's land into a monument to her power. But now, every train horn was a reminder of her failure, echoing through the neighborhood like a battle hymn. Point 6, Freight Festival, and Fallout. Noah didn't believe in gloating. But celebration, that was another matter entirely. With Karen crumbling and the HOA in disarray, Noah saw an opportunity not just to solidify his position, but to reshape the entire narrative. The freight terminal wasn't a scar. It was now the town's pulse, and it deserved a proper introduction. He called Colin. "What if," Noah said, "we throw a freight festival?" There was a pause on the line, followed by laughter. "You mean like food trucks and tours, for a rail yard?" "Exactly. Give the public something real. Let them see what their HOA actually built." Within 72 hours, Titan Freight's PR team was all in. The concept exploded. They arranged booths for local vendors, crate-modified bounce houses for kids, even a branded merchandise table giving away neon vests, toy forklifts, and shirts that read, "Welcome to Freightwater, built by HOA, powered by Karen." Noah sent invitations to residents, officials, reporters, even the mayor. He also made sure a glossy invite landed in Karen's mailbox. She showed up. Of course she did. Just after noon, a black SUV pulled up to the chain-link gate surrounding the now-expanded terminal. Karen stepped out like she was attending a courtroom drama, wearing a navy pantsuit, heels clicking furiously across the gravel. She stormed toward the entrance, only to be stopped by security, a tall woman in a Titan Freight jacket who calmly informed her this was private property. Karen bristled. "I'm the HOA president." The guard smiled politely. "That has no bearing here, ma'am. You're welcome to observe from outside the fence." Karen looked like she had just bitten into a lemon soaked in battery acid. From his vantage point inside, Noah caught her pacing along the perimeter like a trapped animal. He waited a few minutes before strolling over, sipping lemonade from a paper cup. When their eyes met, Karen didn't waste a second. "This is a circus," she hissed. "You've turned a community space into an industrial wasteland." "I turned my land into a revenue engine," Noah replied calmly. "You just funded it with someone else's checkbook." "You'll be hearing from our lawyers," she snapped. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a laminated copy of the civil lawsuit already filed against the HOA. "You already are. And judging by your board's sudden love for silence, you'll be the only one left holding the bag." Her expression cracked. For the first time in weeks, she didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. She just stared at the festival around her, children playing on cargo crates, the mayor shaking Noah's hand, the vendors laughing with workers, the Titan banners snapping in the breeze. It wasn't hers anymore. Karen stepped back, lips pressed tight, then turned and walked to her SUV, eyes blazing but empty. She didn't look back. By late afternoon, the festival was in full swing. Local bands performed on a makeshift stage fashioned from shipping pallets. Tours were given of the loading platforms. One old man even declared it the most exciting thing this town's seen since the Cold War. And best of all, public sentiment was shifting. A woman named Rosa, once a fierce HOA defender, approached Noah near the grill station. "I voted for that commuter rail," she said. "Thought it'd be good for our neighborhood. But this is real work. My nephew just got hired to clean the bays, full-time." Noah smiled. "Glad it's helping people." More residents followed. They asked questions, toured the grounds. Some even offered to help with future expansions. The freight terminal, born out of spite and arrogance, was becoming something else entirely, a symbol of independence, of resistance to overreach. By evening, as the last light faded over Breakwater Cove, Titan's drone buzzed overhead capturing footage of the crowd waving, music blaring, and kids chasing each other between freight containers. The PR team promised to turn it into a national campaign. Noah sat on the roof of the control booth, watching it all unfold. The HOA had tried to bury him. Instead, they'd handed him the biggest megaphone in town. And the sound it made, unmistakable, unstoppable. Steel. Point 7. The last rail laid. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. Filed in Knox County Superior Court, Noah's civil case against the Greenstone Dunes HOA and Karen Dunlap named more than just trespassing. It detailed unauthorized construction, property damage, emotional distress, and lawful seizure of land. And perhaps most damning, misappropriation of homeowner funds for a project outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The evidence was overwhelming. Timestamps, drone footage, deeds, emails, public declarations made during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Even Karen's infamous megaphone rant was now Exhibit G. When the notice was delivered to the HOA's office, the board scattered like sandpipers before a storm. Several of them reached out to Noah in quiet desperation, begging to negotiate. Some claimed ignorance, others blamed Karen outright. One board member, a nervous woman named Deidre, broke down crying over the phone, saying she had just joined last month and thought the rail was a garden path project. Noah didn't budge. He had terms. A public admission of fault, signed by every board member. Full reimbursement for construction costs incurred on his property, plus penalties. A permanent non-interference agreement, barring the HOA from any future claims or actions related to his land. And finally, a written apology from Karen Dunlap, notarized, acknowledging unlawful actions and accepting personal liability for the overreach. The board caved. One by one, they signed. The apology letter arrived in a plain envelope, typed in stiff, embarrassed Times New Roman, with Karen's signature at the bottom in shaky cursive. Noah framed it and hung it right next to the freight lease in his office. As for Karen, she vanished. For weeks, she was nowhere to be seen. Her grand suburban empire had collapsed, and her loyal following had turned their backs. A petition had circulated calling for her permanent removal from the whole board. 83% of residents signed. The board held a vote. Karen didn't even show. She was out. Noah heard rumors that she'd moved in with her sister upstate. Someone else said she was rebranding in a new town under a different name, but it didn't matter. The freight yard still thundered through the night, a daily reminder that you don't get to redraw someone else's boundaries. And Noah, he wasn't done building. Titan Freight approached him with plans for expansion, a second loading dock, a lightweight warehouse for specialty cargo, and an administrative annex to house regional staff. Noah pulled the tax records for the adjacent green space, a plot the HOA had once claimed as a future community garden. Turns out they hadn't paid taxes on it in 5 years. He brought that to the county office, and within 2 weeks, the land went up for auction. Noah placed a bid, and won. The freight yard doubled in size overnight. New jobs were created. Local welders, crane operators, and maintenance crews were hired. Curious residents came by on weekends for tours. Even former skeptics began to embrace the strange, thunderous heartbeat of Breakwater Cove. The town was evolving, louder, yes, but real, purposeful, alive. Noah made one last request to Titan Freight, a plaque. It was mounted beside the terminal gates. Built by arrogance, saved by steel. Property rights prevail. A year to the day after the first train rolled in, the town hosted a second festival. This time, there were no golden scissors, no fake ribbon, no pastel-clad clipboard tyrants. Just families, workers, music, and a sky filled with the rattle and hum of industry. Noah stood on the edge of the loading bay, watching the sun dip behind the machinery. The wind off the sea carried the scent of diesel and pine. He thought back to that first night, when the land had screamed in protest and no one listened. Now, they all heard it. Not as a cry but as a roar of triumph. Somewhere out there, Karen might still be plotting a comeback, spinning a new version of herself. But Noah wasn't worried. She could try. He had trains. And the tracks only ran one way. Valuable lesson. Respect boundaries, both legal and personal, or risk building your own downfall. The story of Noah and the freight yard is a powerful reminder that arrogance, entitlement, And disregard for due process can have devastating consequences even for those who believe they hold all the power. HOA Karen thought she could rewrite property lines with charm and authority, but she underestimated the resolve of someone who knew his rights and was willing to defend them not with rage, but with strategy. In a world where authority is often misused under the guise of community good, this tale teaches us the importance of doing the hard work, checking facts, following laws, and respecting ownership. When people in power act without accountability, they don't just lose control, they fuel the very resistance that undoes them. The lesson is clear. If you ignore the rules, don't be surprised when someone else rewrites the ending.